clear. So I'll turn it over to Marco for the rules of the virtual meeting.
Great, thank you, Jill. Again, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the April Park and Recreation Commission virtual meeting. My name is Marco Rivero. I'm the staff liaison to the PRC. This meeting is being recorded for our public records and will be posted on the Arlington County Commission Meetings YouTube page. And please avoid sharing any personal information that you would not like to have made public. We ask that presenters and attendees please mute your microphones if you're not speaking. During virtual only or hybrid meetings, commissioners joining virtually and who are eligible to vote must have their cameras on for the duration of the meeting for purposes of meeting quorum. For those attending via telephone, you can mute and unmute your microphones by dialing *6. The chat box will be monitored to address any technical or procedural questions during the meeting, but should not be used for meeting discussion. Commissioners should use the raise your hand function on the top toolbar to be recognized during the commission discussion. Assigned presenters may share their screens using the share content box above. As way of information, we'll be holding a public comment period. In order to be recognized, please use the raise your hand function, and each public commenter will have up to 3 minutes for public comment. And staff will signal to the speaker once time is up. For those wondering about public comment, we did not receive anything ahead of time, so we'll ask the question during that period once it comes. So thank you very much, and I will turn it over back to our chair.
Thank you, Marco, and welcome everybody who was just joining. Now is the time for consideration of the minutes. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we're ready to vote. All in favor signify by raising your physical hand or your virtual hand. I think the motion passed. Well, all against indicate by a thumbs down. All right, if the motion passes, thank you, Marco, for preparing the good minutes, especially the ones on the transportation. That was really effective. Okay, now it's time for public comment. Are there any public commenters?
Okay,
Hearing none, it's time for the presentation by Eileen Winquist on the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance amendments.
All right,
thank you, Eileen.
Yep, and I'm going to be co-presenting with Kristen also as well. So let me
thank you, Kristen.
go ahead and share the slides here and give those a minute to hopefully you all can see those okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let me know if there's any volume issues or anything. So, but thank you. We just wanted to thank you all for making some time for our presentation tonight. We just have kind of a brief overview of some amendments that we will be making to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance this year. So just our brief agenda. We're going to be giving an overview of the changes and the schedule for the update, and then we can take questions. And then Kristen has a couple project examples of how the current ordinance is applied to some example projects, and then with the revised ordinance, just so people can kind of see, the differences there. So just as a quick refresher for everyone, or if there's some new members to the commission, Virginia passed the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act in 1988, and the focus of that was to protect water quality in the bay through land use management. And that was really one of the earlier regulations and laws, focused on water quality and protecting that, in terms, through the development process. So. And then when the Bay Act was passed, that then required local governments to adopt their own Chesapeake Bay preservation ordinances, and Arlington did that initially in 1992, and that has been updated several times since then. So the Chesapeake Bay Act kind of designates two of these preservation areas, and there's two components to that. The first is called a resource protection area, and that includes this 100-foot buffer near streams, wetlands, and other sensitive areas. And so that's, again, just a very important buffer area in terms of protecting those water bodies and helping to, filter pollution or runoff. And it also designates resource management areas, and that encompasses the rest of Arlington County. So a lot of times when you think of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance, you might be thinking a lot about these stream buffer areas, but it also includes this designation of the resource management areas. And through those, we implement standards on other activities that can affect water quality, such as tree preservation, some of our tree laws, basically. So just again, as a refresher, why are RPAs important? What are the benefits that they have? And so there's, kind of a multitude of things. They help to shade, the streams and the water bodies, by having that vegetated and the tree canopy area. And that's important for the wildlife, in the streams and the water and, maybe a lake or a wetland. They help to stabilize the soil and the stream banks. They also provide space for flooding, and so that is important. In Arlington, as we're kind of trying to deal with flooding issues and becoming more flood resilient. So having that space for those flood waters, just to allow a space for those to flow is important. They also can help filter and absorb runoff, and as I mentioned, support wildlife habitat in terms of all the plants and structure and kind of areas for nesting and things like that, but also protecting the water itself in terms of keeping the temperature a little bit lower and providing the shade, which is important for fish and aquatic species. So just under the ordinance as it stands now, we just wanted to kind of review what sort of things need county approval, and specifically focusing on these areas, these RPA or resource protection areas. So that is any development or redevelopment on a property where RPA is present, and that would be a home addition or a rebuild. And you may wonder, why is it, that Arlington, has development that is already in the RPA areas, but obviously Arlington developed a long time ago before any of these environmental laws were in place. So we do have parcels and things that are, completely within a resource protection area. So, this is something that that does, happen. And obviously some of our park areas, as you guys, deal with a lot as well. So any project that requires a building or a land disturbing activity permit on an RPA property, and even if the building or construction activity is outside of the RPA, it still needs to be reviewed, for its impact on the RPA itself. New paved surfaces in the RPA, new structures in the RPA, or removing vegetation from the RPA, or fences or retaining walls. So those are the kind of the main things that currently need county review and approval. And there is an exception may need to be requested for some projects, and the county has what's called a water quality impact assessment form that the applicant or the property owner would fill out, and it provides information about their project, and then the county can review those, and some are referred to the Chesapeake Bay Ordinance Review Commission, and then there would be actually a hearing in some cases. So just, in terms to provide some background, why are we updating the ordinance at this time? So in 2020, the Virginia General Assembly passed a bill to make some amendments to the Chesapeake Bay Act. And so what we are doing is updating our ordinance now to include those changes that were made at the state level. So the changes relate to kind of adding language to protect trees during development in both resource protection areas and resource management areas. And then the second kind of focus area relates to resilience and conducting a resilience assessment for development within RPAs. And that's really looking at potential impacts of sea level rise or storm surge or floodplain, if there's a floodplain on the property. So kind of looking at those factors. So we are updating our ordinance to include these required changes. And we do actually have a deadline, despite the fact that the state updates were made back in 2020. The model ordinance and things, were shared with us last year, and so in 2024. So we've been working with those, but we do have a deadline of September of 2025 to make these updates. So there are two, as I mentioned, two kind of main focus areas for the updates: strengthening the tree protections and codifying. And some of these tree amendments that we'll be making, the county was actually already, doing some of those as a matter of policy, but this will actually codify those requirements in the ordinance. And so that actually applies for resource protection areas and resource management areas. And then, as we mentioned earlier, the climate change amendments focus on the coastal resilience and potential impacts from projects in the RPA areas. So at that, I will turn it over to Kristen, and she'll provide a little bit more detail.
Thanks, Eileen. Yes, so I'm going to start first by providing a little bit more detail about what the tree amendments do in terms of strengthening protection for trees. They encourage conservation of trees during development in both RPAs and RMAs. So the tree amendments affect trees countywide during development. The amendment does this by including a definition for mature trees and requiring that mature trees are protected to the extent feasible, considering the proposed use during development. The amendments also require trees to be used to replant the RPA buffer for RPA restoration. This is something that in the county we have long been requiring, but the specific language that requires trees to be replanted when trees are removed from the buffer was not clear in the ordinance. So a lot of this language goes to clarify that requirement. So the revised language requires trees to be planted to restore the RPA buffer, to offset tree removal during development, or to replace trees that are removed for buffer management. It also requires that trees and plants used to replant the buffer be native. It further specifies that trees should not be removed when pruning is sufficient. So as Eileen mentioned, under Arlington's existing ordinance language and policies, many of these things were already being required, but the amendments clarify them and strengthen the requirements by adding them to the ordinance. So for example, the specific language requiring trees to be used for buffer reestablishment will result in a stronger and focus on native tree planting and buffer restoration when impacts to the RPA occur. Jill, you have a question.
Oh, you're on mute.
You're
Jill,
muted. Sorry.
Sorry, is it okay to interrupt with questions, or do you want us to wait till the end?
Sure. Yeah,
I think
go
it's
ahead.
fine.
I'm just wanting to clarify, does the development in this case refer to both single family as well as larger developments, the commercial type developments?
Yes, it does not distinguish.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Thanks. All right, so let's go to the next slide. So I'm sure you're wondering what a mature tree is under the ordinance. So this gives you the definition. The amendments define a mature tree as a canopy tree that's 12 inches or greater in diameter at breast height, or an understory tree 4 inches or greater at breast height. And as I mentioned, mature trees may only be removed when necessary for proposed development. So our current ordinance already protects native vegetation in RPAs and specifically requires identification of impacts to trees that are 3 inches or greater in diameter at breast height. So protecting trees in the range of the mature trees designated by the ordinance isn't new for Arlington, but the new definition and requirements related to mature trees do strengthen protection for those trees specifically during development, both in RPAs and in RMAs. Jill, did you have another question? I want to make sure. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. Thanks.
Yes.
Okay. So these changes affect removals of dead, dying, or diseased trees, as well as removal of noxious vegetation. And noxious vegetation under the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance includes poison ivy, poison sumac, as well as non-native invasive vegetation like multiflora rose or English ivy. And I do realize that poison ivy is a native plant and has a lot of habitat value. It is still defined as the noxious vegetation under the ordinance, and that's a state mandate. So the amendments require written county approval prior to removing a dead, dying, or diseased tree, or for any land disturbance for tree removal or invasive plant control. The new language also requires replacement of trees that are removed with other trees within 6 months. Additionally, the ordinance has always allowed and will continue to allow tree removal under certain limited situations to create access paths, to create sight lines and views, and for stream bank and erosion control. However, the new ordinance language requires that tree replacement occur when trees are removed for these purposes. Andrew, I think you have a question.
Yes. Well, of course, nothing like we don't have a full influence in whether the ordinance passes or not. But I must say that I find this to be a little bit of a maybe potentially counterproductive ordinance, putting in more requirements or stipulations before you're even allowed to remove dying or diseased trees. Doesn't that just accelerate the spread of tree disease if it makes it more and more difficult to remove them in the first place with the not just the replacement mandates, but also needing county approval and needing to go through a paperwork process even before you can remove diseased and dying trees? We should be making it easier to remove diseased and dying trees and invasive plants rather than making it more difficult. So I'd have to say that I find the priorities are a little bit odd here.
Yeah, so dead, dying, and diseased trees have always been able to be removed. And there has always been a review process for that. We do that by email. It's typically pretty straightforward. The requirement really revolves around documentation so that the trees that are removed are, so that people aren't removing healthy trees and claiming that they're dead, dying, or diseased. I know that our urban foresters are really not happy about the inclusion of diseased trees in this language, to be honest, because, there are many trees that are providing multiple ecosystem services that, may have some kind of tree disease. It's, I guess, as our urban forester has said, almost every tree has some kind of disease, basically. So, but I appreciate your feedback and, understand where that's coming from. We definitely encourage replacement of non-native vegetation with native plants whenever folks approach us with that proposal. All right. So the amendments do also add new requirements related to climate change adaptation. And this is for land development in the RPA. These requirements require a resiliency assessment to be completed to assess the impacts of floodplains, storm surge, or sea level rise on a proposed project. And the water quality impact assessment form that's used to apply for impacts in RPAs will include a section for the resiliency assessments that all projects will have to complete. Certain properties may need to complete a more extensive site-specific assessment. And if a property has RPA and is affected by floodplains, storm surge, or sea level rise, that site-specific assessment may need to be completed. Applicants may also be required to modify their proposed project or to include nature-based adaptation measures to limit climate impacts to the property, the proposed development, or to offset potential impacts to adjoining properties. So how do you know if your property has floodplain or is potentially impacted by storm surge or sea level rise? The county has incorporated state data on climate resiliency into a climate resiliency lookup tool to make finding this information easier for Arlington residents. This tool will allow applicants to input their addresses and to find out about the presence or absence of these factors. So the lookup tool will show whether or not a property has resource protection area, as well as whether the 3 factors, sea level rise, storm surge, or floodplain, impact the property. The example we have here is for the Gulf Branch Nature Center. When the address for the Nature Center was submitted, it comes back showing, this tool comes back showing that the Nature Center is impacted by RPA and that it also is impacted by floodplain. So the Nature Center, if it was submitting an application, would be required to complete a resiliency assessment. So how many properties in Arlington are affected by this? It is not all properties, it's only a subset of them. There are about 1,500 parcels impacted by RPA in the county. About a third of those also have floodplain, and a very few, less than around 30 actually, are impacted by sea level rise and storm surge. So for Arlington, this has a relatively limited impact. So this illustrates the resiliency assessment that's been incorporated into the water quality impact assessment. It refers to the interactive climate resiliency lookup tool and is designed so that people can, for most people, they'll be able to check just that the resiliency assessment was not required, or if it is required, they'll check the box and then may have to complete a more specific resiliency assessment as an appendix. I mentioned the nature-based adaptation measures. This is an additional change that these are a new allowed use in the resource protection area on a case-by-case basis, subject to county review. Adaptation measures are nature-based projects that use plants, stone, and soil to offset climate change impacts. These projects can be required as mitigation by the county or may be installed on a voluntary basis. And the state has provided Arlington with a list of, well, they've provided a list of potential nature-based practices that could be allowed in the RPA. And the county is currently reviewing that list to see which practices make sense for our locality. The amendments also prioritize living shorelines to stabilize and provide erosion control. Considering that much of Arlington's tidal shoreline is publicly owned, this isn't a great application in Arlington, but it was a change that was required to be made to our ordinance.
Great.
All right, now I'll turn it over to Eileen.
Yep, thanks, Kristen. So just a quick review of the schedule. As we mentioned, we had, received the model ordinance and kind of guidance from the state, partway through last year, and we're working to revise our ordinance. And currently DEQ is reviewing that, kind of our updated and revised ordinance. And so we've been doing outreach related to this. We sent letters to property owners and created a video that's been available, and we've held a meeting in March, and then also been doing outreach to some of the commissions and to the development community this month as well. So then we will likely do some follow-up outreach to the property owners that are most impacted with this, that with the RPA properties. And we are, currently planning to do an RTA in May and potentially go to the board in June, for them to consider the updated ordinance. And so again, that's a little bit dependent on when we hear back from DEQ with their current review and if they have any additional comments. So it is a little bit of a of a tight time frame. We do have that deadline in September for these changes to be made. And so also coming out of our public meeting that we held, we are planning some additional information sessions in the fall for some of the property owners to, again, just provide more background on, RPA and kind of managing if you have a property with RPA, tips, for managing that and just kind of resources. And then probably a little bit more specifics related to these changes. And so one additional kind of new outreach plan that we came up with, during the meeting was to actually create an email list, which we have not had a specific email newsletter for RPA property owners up to date. So that's something new that we will be establishing, and can then also kind of communicate a little more easily with this particular audience that way. So we can pause there if there are any additional questions, and then Kristen does, if we have time, I think, have a couple, quick project examples, so that sometimes can be helpful to illustrate things. But it looks like Gary, I think, and then Daniel, maybe.
Okay.
Mhm.
This is Gary. I have two questions. One, do the RPA rules apply to all streams in Arlington, or are some streams not covered?
Yeah, so Arlington has chosen to establish RPAs on all streams, regardless of whether or not they flow year-round and whether or not they're in a natural or man-made channel.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is, do the RPA rules also apply to government entities or just private property owners?
No, they also apply to public projects and institutional and commercial projects as well. However, there are exemptions for certain kinds of projects. And many of those fall in the public realm, like transportation improvements and bridges and utility
Renewable
work.
settings. Mhm.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Daniel, I think, and then Jill.
Yeah, I might have missed this. And I think it's great that you all are considering doing a targeted outreach list for the RPA property owners. Do we have a ballpark of about how many affected properties there are?
So there are 1,500 or give or take RPA properties in Arlington, and floodplain affects about 500 of those. And then sea level rise and storm surge, very, very few. I think sea level rise affects 10 and storm surge affects about 35. So very, very few. We also looked back trying to see how many applications we get each year where this would come into play. And in the last 5 years, there were only 12 applications that came into us that had RPA projects where floodplain was also present. And only 2 of those where the work was actually in the floodplain. So this is the climate change. I think it has the potential to be very powerful, but in Arlington, I think there's a very limited application for it.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha, thank you. And I had another question just kind of in general about the education outreach piece to homeowners who are dealing with disease trees and stuff like that. I was taking a look at the website. I didn't see a lot of resources directed towards homeowners or anything. And also, I was curious if any of that outreach was being prepared in other languages, potentially.
Sure. No, that's a good question. And I think, right now we have, the RPA webpage, and, it has a lot of good information on there and FAQs, and we do have a brochure. But I think most of that is in English. So that's something that I think with these updates, we can definitely, create some of that in additional languages as well. And then I think, one other thing, as Kristen was mentioning, the number of sort of parcels, that are affected. Some of the parcels with RPA are some of our multifamily properties. So sometimes it's, it might be more property owners, but it might be like a condo or, some of those communities where they may not be kind of directly, doing the work, themselves. It might be more through like a management company.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Jill?
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up. I had the same issue that Gary had about public properties because the two largest parks in Arlington are owned by Nova Parks, Potomac Overlook and Upton Hill, and they're both on RPA. And so it doesn't seem like these rules apply to them unless there is a construction project. Is that what I'm understanding? I mean, there's no, these rules just don't kick in unless there's a construction project proposed.
A lot of the requirements come into play when development occurs. Yeah,
but
I mean,
the tree notification should be, that's kind of independent, right, of a construction project. So
yeah. So I mean, there are also requirements about forest management and notifications about tree removal and that kind of thing as well.
Oh, okay. All right.
That would apply to them. Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing really about the location of Potomac Overlook on the Potomac River and the fact that it's subject to tidal variations and there's a lot of erosion there. There's really nothing in this ordinance that addresses anything that we can do. We can't make them do anything about it by using this ordinance.
In terms of mandating, I mean, if they were going to do something, I mean, potentially like the living shorelines or something like that might come into play, I guess. But yeah, in terms of like, sort of recommending or requiring something, yeah.
I mean, would it affect the what's the name of the trail that goes from Chainbridge all the way to Roosevelt Island? That trail is sometimes underwater, and it actually has been affected considerably by the National Park Service's, construction that they're doing.
Okay.
Potomac Heritage Trail is what it's called.
That's it.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah, Potomac Heritage Trail. And if that trail were to be updated or so-called, I mean, would there be anything that could happen with respect to maintaining that trail, which could trigger these types of requirements? Do we know? I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm just...
So federal properties are they're supposed to adopt standards that are equivalent to the standards that we have for resource protection areas, but we don't directly we can't directly designate resource protection areas on federal property, and we can't apply our requirements directly to them. So, but they are supposed to be following equivalent standards. So, but they do that through their own, environmental assessment, NEPA kind of process.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've gotten too far afield. I should let you finish your presentation.
No, these are all really good questions. Yeah, no.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have time to do the couple quick examples? I don't know. I forget exactly where.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
okay, all right. We can maybe quickly touch on those.
We'll try and go through them quickly.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to show you a few examples. This is a home where the RPA, it actually goes through the house, actually where the red marker is. And so this part of this house, and originally they had a deck in the back. Could you go back for a second?
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. So originally they had a deck in the back. Ooh, that was cool. Thank you. And so what they proposed to do for this project was to replace this deck with an addition. So that adds, new rooftop, but they aren't really adding any additional development footprint in the RPA. So, go through. So we just wanted to show you what the requirements were and would be. As Eileen mentioned, certain things require an exception. One of those is when you add new impervious cover in the RPA. So but because this was a home that was already in the RPA, staff would administer this. So they would get an administrative exception. They need to provide a plat, a water quality impact assessment, and an exception request. And then because they are asking for an exception, we would require mitigation for the impact. And typically at this point, we would have asked for invasive plant management. With the new requirements, we would have to ask for mitigation. However, when there's limited space on a property, we're still going to be looking at things like enhancing existing forest area versus adding new planting areas, because in some cases, that's just not going to be possible for some properties. So we wanted to show one other example that this one's more for the climate change amendments. This home has RPA on it. The property has RPA on it and also 100-year floodplain. You can see the blue line is the stream that goes all the way through the property, and RPA extends 100 foot from that. So it takes up a large portion of this property. And then this shows the floodplain that impacts this property. And the floodplain comes up right to the back of the home, and their existing garage, which is not currently attached, is in the floodplain. And so this project that we actually have reviewed already was to connect the existing house to the garage. There's like a patio area. And then they wanted to expand the garage, so they were adding living space in the floodplain. So the impact to the RPA is actually really minor, but because they're impacting the floodplain, that would kind of trigger the resiliency requirement. So we just wanted to show, and they are taking out one tree for this. It was a very limited impact. Again, this would be an administrative exception because they're adding some RPA footprint, very small. They'd have to do a plan, water quality impact assessment exception request, but they'd have to do the site-specific resiliency assessment because they're actually impacting the floodplain. They'd have to replace any trees they removed, but they then would also probably have to do buffer restoration for the area they disturbed, and 2 times any new impervious footprint. And currently right now we have separate floodplain review from RPA review, but now with the new resiliency assessments, the floodplain review and approval would be required before we could issue the RPA approval. And in reality, this isn't a huge change because we always communicated and coordinated with each other, but it makes it explicit. And then we could require alterations or nature-based adaptation measures. And looking at this is something where we would probably require additional floodplain planting to help protect the development that would be proposed. So that's kind of an example of how that might work. Does anyone have any questions on this? Sure, go ahead.
I think Gary?
Okay. In terms of the invasive plant management, what sort of requirements are in that?
So that's something that there's a requirement for buffer enhancement with every project. And, in Arlington, we have a lot of invasive plant issues. And so what we usually start, it's really very project and site specific, but what we usually start with is vines and trees, because if we can get invasive vines out of trees, then we can create a much healthier tree canopy. So that's where we usually start. And then depending on what else is proposed for the project or what the property looks like, we might ask for additional control.
Okay. And those requirements are triggered by some construction project by the property owner?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jill?
Jill?
Thanks. I was just wondering, under what conditions would you deny a permit or an exception request?
Yeah. So we typically say you can do that, but you need to do this to offset it. And sometimes people say, I don't want to do that.
So the offset, so there is a balance weighed between how much additional stormwater or something is going to be created by, how much more runoff is going to be created by the project compared to how much stormwater capture is going to be created by the buffers or the new amenities.
Yes. So,
Okay.
folks can propose things and our response to that is usually, the mitigation for that would be this. And sometimes that's not acceptable. Also, depending on the impact, your permitting, like Eileen mentioned the exception request to the Chesapeake Bay Ordinance Review Committee. That's a public hearing process. People will tend to back off of projects that would require that.
Mm-hmm.
And there are, we also, the development process is a little bit of a negotiation. So sometimes what people propose initially, we say no to, but then there's another variation. They'll change the orientation or the impact, or they won't do as much grading, or, and then we can approve it. So that it may work that way as well.
And so all the other, I don't know what to say, generally just rules that we have about new development and not rolling over the tree roots and, different things. Those things are all still applicable. It's just, these are enhanced things. So,
Yep. Well, and some of those, depending on the size of the project, right? But if it is a project that requires like an LDA permit, then those factors come into play too.
yeah, I can't think of any commercial projects that we've had in the RPA. Have there been any that we would review under SPRC?
There are 2 site plans right now. Ballston 1 and it's on Langston and Kirkwood. There's one that's coming up. There tend to be relatively few commercial projects in the RPA. Just there aren't very many RPA properties to begin with, but yeah, we happen to have 2 right now, which is unusual.
Is that the Walgreens site, Kristen?
Yeah, the
Langston and Kirkwood?
Yeah, the Walgreens site. Yep.
And that would be Spout Run, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's Spout Run.
Yes. Yeah, the Spout Run watershed. Yes.
Wow, that's interesting that's in the RPA. Is the stream underground there? I guess it is.
It's it's daylighted across the street. There's a little bit of parkland across the street, and the RPA extends onto the Walgreens property.
Wow.
Yeah, it's channelized there, and it's not easy to access, but it's there.
But it also applies, you said earlier, it also applies to undergrounded streams, right?
Not underground, but ephemeral. She was talking about sort of intermittent, ephemeral. So there could be a channel that doesn't flow year round, or if it's concrete, even a concrete channel, it applies to, but not underground streams, because then we would have like a lot more RPA in Arlington.
Yes, we would.
Yeah, we'd have just about a whole 100%.
Probably the whole county would be. Anyway. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. Are there any more questions? Did you guys have more presentation?
No, that's it. That's
No.
yeah, just the examples
okay.
there. So I did send the slides to Marco. So yeah, he will have
Thank you.
those.
I did receive them.
Great. Well, we really appreciate you. Do any commissioners have anything else they want to say? So if we wanted to send a letter commenting on this, we would do it before the county board takes it up, probably in, you said May, I think? No.
The
I think-
request,
Yeah,
the request to advertise is going to be at the May board meeting, and then approval or adoption in June.
Okay, so we would have to do it at our next meeting. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, really
Yeah.
appreciate all the great comments and questions. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for
Yeah.
having us.
All right.
All right, let me stop sharing. That would be helpful. Sorry. All right. Good night.
Good
Thank you.
night.
Good night.
Okay. Well, that was good. Now we get to work on something really enjoyable, which is the Bill Thomas Award. I see Claire. Is William here as well?
I don't see William, but yeah.
Claire, I'm sorry, it's all on your shoulders. Can you give
No
us your
worries.
little report, your report?
Yes. Hi, everyone. So tonight I'll be presenting the nominee, the tree stewards of Arlington and Alexandria. This honestly was our only eligible nominee. We had two others, and one had gotten the award recently, and then the other, we didn't feel like there was enough supporting documentation. So I will be presenting on the tree stewards. And just to give a little bit more context, the previous winner, Caroline Haynes, let us know that several others were going to put forth nominations, but when they heard that the tree stewards were being nominated, they decided to step back, which really shows that this organization is highly regarded and their work is well known and respected in our community. So a little bit of background on the tree stewards of Arlington and Alexandria. They have been a partner of Arlington County since 2001, and their programming focuses on helping plant and maintain trees and educating the public on the value of trees. And at the end of the year of 2024, the tree stewards spent around 1,718 hours volunteering and carrying out very important programming, which I've divided into 3 different groups. So first group, they're really on the ground and they're taking care of our trees. They have something called a structural pruning program for young trees, which provides pruning that will help the structural stability of trees into maturity, which will reduce the risk of tree and limb failure in the future. And the tree stewards, in coordination with Arlington County, pruned over 3,000 young trees. They also have mulching projects where volunteers worked across 4 locations to spread mulch that was actually sourced from the solid waste department, which not only improved the soil, but it prevented this material from entering our waste systems. And then lastly, they have an invasive species removal workshop groups, and it's open to the community, and the volunteers teach how to pull the right plant and how to stay safe while doing so. So their second kind of grouping of programming is their citizen science projects, which have provided extremely helpful data and information for the county. Volunteers used iTreeCanopy to analyze tree canopy, and using a point-based statistics system, which really helped inform general trends for our tree canopy. And then additionally, they assisted the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance to understand how effective the county's tree canopy regulations are after certain projects close. And this data will be very crucial in the future to help us understand how to better manage our urban forests. And then lastly, they focus on advocacy and education. An example of this is a project with Marymount University. They planted 30 large trees in Fort Bernard Park, which is a tree equity area. And the students that got involved learned all about tree planting and the neighborhood. And lastly, they worked with the county staff and contractors to provide a helpful guide on how to keep trees with solar panels. So this organization's diverse programming that focuses on tree health, citizen science, advocacy, and education aligns with the PRC's values and goals. And their work not only furthers the sustainability of Arlington County, but it also provides spaces for the community to connect and learn more about the importance of our tree canopy. And they also provide very helpful pathways for individuals to take effective action. And for that reason, our committee has, or our smaller committee has selected them for the 2024 Bill Thomas Volunteer Award. And I'll briefly kind of go through our methodology, our rubric. So the nominees were assessed and scored in several different areas, including the first, the type of activity described and the importance to county parks and public spaces. The second being the duration of activities and the amount of time committed. The third being quality and sustainability of nominated activities. The fourth, benefit, impact, and value of activities. And then finally, the nominees' initiative, engagement, leadership, and civic values were exemplified. And hopefully this kind of brief introduction and overview of all of their programming validates their extremely high scores in all of these categories. And we hope that you feel that this is well deserved.
Great. Thank you for a great presentation. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Nice job, Claire.
Thank you.
Yes, very nice job.
It was a very easy selection process, just given we didn't have too many to choose from.
Well, yes and no. I don't know what their roster is, but when I've seen them out in force, there are a lot of them.
But yeah, thanks. Jill, that was my question. Who are they? Is it a open group? Is it a small number of people? What do we know about the individuals?
I don't know about the individuals per se, but they are a community group. I can put their webpage in our chat.
I know a lot about them.
Yeah.
I work at I'm a volunteer park steward at Upton Hill, and I have worked closely with a lot of the park stewards. In fact, I guess it was about 2 weeks ago, they had 2 weeks ago they helped me plant 200 trees, bare root trees. There were a total of 39 volunteers, individual volunteers who came. A lot of them were tree stewards. I don't know off the top of my head how many were tree stewards, but the ones who were not tree stewards were definitely influenced by the tree stewards who were there, who were helping and teaching the planting. In addition, they provided a grant, half of the grant. The other half came from the Northern Virginia Bird Alliance to pay for the trees that were planted and the caging against the deer. They have been around for a long time. Nora Palmatier was, I believe, the founder, and I know her very well. She is a former chair of the Forestry and Natural Resources Commission and has been a long time advocate in natural resources management in our area. And then another project that I'm familiar with the tree stewards doing is in city of Alexandria. A friend of mine is a park steward at a park that is a new park next to a development, and the tree stewards there put in over, I think, about 100 trees that the city itself paid for, but the volunteers planted them. So I think it's a great organization, and I think when we have our party, we're going to be swarmed. I don't know how many there are, but there's a lot of them.
Well, it'll be great exposure for them, right? To get an award and the publicity with this. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll mention that they were submitted group last year. and scored very highly. And in addition to answer David's questions, they also go through formal training. So this is not just like an impromptu group. They go through formal training. They know what they're doing. They've been an enormous benefit, as Claire discussed, to helping with formal county efforts. They do very good work and have been doing so for many years.
And if I could add just a few positive comments, I've participated in quite a few tree planting projects with the tree stewards, and they have been incredibly helpful in terms of making sure we're planting the right tree in the right place. And they have also been very helpful just in terms of the planting techniques that should be followed. And maybe the most important of all is the proper maintenance of the trees once you've planted them. Because I know prior to being tutored by them, my attrition rate was very high in terms of tree planting. So they have certainly helped me tremendously in that category. And they're often there rolling up their own sleeves to do the heavy labor. So they're just a wonderful, dedicated group.
Great. Thank you for all those great comments and questions. Is there anything else we want to talk about before we vote? Okay. Oh, Andrew, go ahead.
Andrew, yeah.
You're on mute, Andrew.
I loved the presentation regarding Chesapeake Bay, but I will say that if we are drafting up a letter on this, just to give my opinion out there, I do think that the new requirements are just adding stricter rules to the modification or changes to the natural environment, and I kind of want to dispense with the notion that any modification or change is bad. And I'm not saying that to encourage development or something like that. I'm saying that we need intensive management to keep invasive species out, because DC is a hotbed of invasive species. The suburbs in this area, I mean, if you look at areas where invasive species enter the US, it's either here or New York, typically. And I don't know if putting tighter rules on people trying to fix their own properties and fix the environmental issues that they have from invasive species is going to fix things. So I don't know if the rules are quite necessary. I think the existing rules are kind of strict, and this just makes them stricter. So,
Andrew,
Okay, thanks,
I was going to
Andrew.
say, Andrew, just to clarify, that was for the previous item, correct?
Yeah,
yes,
we haven't.
yes, not
Yeah.
yes, the previous
Yeah.
item.
So what we'll
Thank
do,
you.
we're going to go ahead and thank you for the comment, but we're going to put that in abeyance for a moment. We're going to vote on the Bill Thomas Award, and then we will
Apologies, I
discuss.
thought it was a general discussion about the meeting. My apologies.
No,
Oh,
it's
no
okay.
problem, no problem. But we do need to discuss filing a letter with the county, so we'll take that up next, or at some point. Remind me if I don't get to it.
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
pick it up as part of other business. Mhm.
Okay. Okay, any more questions or comments on the Bill Thomas Award? Sorry, I didn't clarify. Okay, hearing none, it's time to vote. Please indicate that you're in favor of the tree stewards getting the Bill Thomas Award by raising your real or virtual hand.
So,
And
Jill,
everybody who is,
I was going to say, Jill, in terms of procedure, we would need somebody to make the motion first and then a second.
well, it's a committee. The committee has made the motion, right?
Okay.
So we need a,
I'll make the
we don't
motion if
really
you
need
it.
a second, but go
I'll
ahead.
second.
Okay, Alex seconds, thanks. All right, now we're ready to vote. I'm sorry, Marco.
No, it's okay.
All right, raise your, do we have to have our real, everybody has to be on camera if you're
Camera
voting.
and virtual hand if you can. That would be easier to
All
tally.
right. Adam, can you pop onto the camera for a second? Thank you.
So these are in favor, and I am seeing 10
Oh, there's Nelson. Hey, Nelson.
and 11. Okay. So I'm seeing 11 hands. Any abstentions or otherwise? Okay.
Anybody opposed?
Okay, so
Everybody.
The highest
Let's
total
put
I saw was
let's put the four hands down now.
the highest total I saw was 11, so I'll say 11-0 passes.
Okay. Claire and Andrew, you're done, right? Andrew still has something to say. Do you want to talk, Andrew?
I mean, I could repeat what I said, but I think those are my thoughts on the oh, I'm sorry. Is this just an issue about the hand raising?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm laughing. But it's one of those
Zoom moments.
parliamentarian funny moments. Sorry. Let us declare that the winner of the Bill Thomas Award is the tree stewards. Yay,
Right.
tree stewards. All right.
And then
okay.
just Jill and everyone in the PRC, what I'll do is I will convey this information to our communications team, and we will begin planning for the recognition ceremony, which at this point we have scheduled for the county board's recess meeting in May. So that would be on Tuesday, May 13th, which is the same date as our next meeting.
Right, and we need to write a letter to the county board. Claire, do you mind drafting one up? There's a template that you can use from last year on the website. But I'll see if I have it and I can forward that to you, but it's just very straightforward, and we'll sign it we'll put it on the letterhead, and we'll send that to the county board. So they're not the winner until the county board says they're the winner.
Correct.
There'll be a nice presentation. It's good if you can attend it. It's going to be in the afternoon. It takes about 5 minutes because that's all the time the county board gives us. And Claire, if you like, you could be the one to make the motion for the county board. And then there's a nice photo opportunity. Then we recess. Well, we leave along with the swarm of people who had their picture taken, and we go out and have a party. And the person who nominated them is Vincent Verwaja, who's the urban forester. And we'll ask him to give a few words, and then probably the president of the tree stewards will give a few words, and then we'll have some food and drink. And then we'll have our meeting a few hours later, which is always annoying. But anyway, okay.
So hold on for a minute, Joe. I want to add something because this kind of surprised me when I was on the hook for this. So you will be asked to say a few words to the county board. They will ask for a very brief summary of how wonderful the tree stewards are and why they're getting the award. So just have 60 seconds of something in the can and ready to go so that you're not like, oh, wait, I was supposed to talk.
And you know what? And thank you for that, Alex, because I think what we tried to do also for, at least for this year as well as last year, is what we're going to do is we'll have essentially a run of show prepared with our comms team. So we'll be able to share that with either Claire or William or even or you, Joe, whomever wants to speak on this. And then we can plan it out that way. So yes, thank you for that. We have learned from our previous actions.
That was a tough year, Alex. Okay. All right. Any more questions about giving the award or how that whole thing's going to work? Oh, I just want to say one more thing. The person who didn't have enough data on their award, we looked him up today during our check-in meeting with Marco. And it turns out there is an article written about him in Arl Now about what a good job he does picking up trash. He's 87-year-old retiree. And so, even though he didn't win the award, we think it would be nice to invite him and then just give him a certificate or some little token that says, you were nominated. And so he might get his picture taken too, unless anybody objects to that.
I think that's a great idea.
Do you remember what park he does this at?
Glen Carlin.
Okay.
And he walks all the way from Ballston to Glen Carlin several times a week, and then walks miles within Glen Carlin looking for trash. So for a guy at that age, I mean, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was a nice story. So, all right. Okay, thank you. Okay, we don't have a staff report because we just had 2 weeks in between the last meeting, and now it's time for commission member reports. And I wanted to specifically call on William, is William here yet?
I do not see him.
All right. Well, we can hold that until next week. Maybe he keeps not coming because he doesn't want to talk about it. I don't know. And then I wanted to call on, let me first call on Dave early to talk about what happened and what you might run into and what the solution was on a site plan. We didn't get the notice about a meeting in time. And so Dave missed it and I couldn't go. So I've written to some of you throughout the week saying, oh, I got this notice. Did you get it? Because of this was what happened. Apparently I get all the notices and I hadn't been forwarding them to people until I saw this one, which was very late in coming. And this is again, one of these projects that would have been, if we had been doing this all along, at the bottom of our agenda, you know, one of these ones that's on hold, because it was resuscitated from 2023. So what happened was they didn't have the updated the list. So Dave, do you want to tell how you handled it? Because I think it's very helpful for other people to hear this.
Oh, sure. Yeah, thanks. So, yeah, they were working off a very old list, and I think this meeting came up fairly quickly. But I was able to reach out to both the chairman and the lead liaison from the planning team, the county staff, and of course, the meeting is recorded. And all the materials are up on the project site. So I was able to catch up really quickly. And they gave their apologies for not including us during the meeting. But it was a pretty quick turnaround to get back caught up. And this was the first of this series. There'll be another one sometime in the future. The usual process, I understand, is 2 weeks notice when a meeting is scheduled for the reviews. So,
that's correct.
Yeah, so hopefully that'll give everybody 2 weeks notice. If I might, Jill, just give you one quick note on this one, because I think it'll be an interesting conversation when we come back to talk about it, because this site, it's called the Inn of Roslyn. It's on Fairfax Drive, just outside of Roslyn, right along Route 50. It's an old Art Deco type hotel that's been vacant for some time. It's proposed to be redeveloped as a 142 unit residential building, but it's within the North Fort Myer Heights planning area, which is subject to a 2008 area plan. This specific site was identified in that plan in 2008 for a significant open space to reflect some of the needs in the community, but also some of the historical uses in that block. The developer has proposed a project without any significant green space. They have tried to do some things, but it is not, it's a deviation from the plan. So the staff has made that point. That's something that we would have commented on at the meeting, I'm sure. And so where we are now is waiting for the proponent or the applicant to come back, and we'll see if they do anything different. I suspect they won't. And our job will be, the task will be to figure out what to say about that. Will we be comfortable in the trade-offs of the economic viability of the site as they proposed it without the open space? Or do we, comment the other way and say, hey, you need to do the open space, which was in the guidance document as a policy direction back in 2008. So that's where we are on that. And the point is, it was pretty easy to catch back up. The staff was very, very helpful in pointing us in the right direction.
And are you going to, did you already make your views known that there should be open space? Are you going to send them emails, or how is that going to get communicated for the record?
Well,
Can we just send them an email from you on behalf of the PRC that, you know, we missed the meeting, but we definitely echo the comments of the staff that there should be open space.
yeah, absolutely. He welcomed that. If you'd
Yeah.
like me to do that, I'd be happy to do that on behalf of
I
this.
think,
Perfect.
yeah, I think that as you're our representative to that, so you can do that on your own without us having a vote on or anything like that.
Great.
Where we have to come back to this body is at the point where we send a letter to the county board.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So-
really interesting. So what the applicant has said they've tried to do is put some planters on the grade coming down Pierce Street, move the building a little bit and put some 4-foot high concrete planters. They look lovely in the renderings, you can see them, but it's not green open space, right? So
Yeah.
I'll
Okay.
I'll get back to Peter with those comments and
Yeah, just a couple sentences, you know, just saying, whatever.
Yep.
We echo the staff, so you won't be
Excellent.
raising something new, you know, that which could create its own issue. You're emphasizing something that was already said, so
Perfect.
that's perfect.
Yep.
So I just wanted to go through that for everybody's benefit, because I actually didn't know what to do in that situation, so we figured it out, and I thought that was helpful for everybody to hear. Do we
Jill,
want to talk about, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say just one more thing related to that.
Sure.
So David, yes, if you can send that whatever points you would want to raise to Peter, but also keep in mind that there would be that future SPRC meeting where one of the topics would be, for example, transportation, open space development, things like that. So there would be another opportunity to voice follow-up opinions and ideas or concerns at that point as well. And Jill, to your point again, if there is going to be a significant public space or open space component to the project, typically we would want to have the applicant or staff provide a presentation to our commission to have that larger discussion.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, that often happens. Yeah. Okay. Okay, any more on that? Anybody? Okay, anybody else want to talk about anything on the commission member reports? I'm holding in abeyance the golf branch because we're going to talk about the letter that Alex provided. Anybody else want to talk about their projects or anything? Okay. Okay, so let's do this. Let's talk about the Gulf Branch letter, and then let's talk about the Chesapeake Bay ordinance and whether we want to write a letter on that. Okay, then we'll hear from Andrew at that stage. Sorry, Andrew. Is that all right?
Jill,
Okay.
prior to that, I don't know if you wanted to address the PSMP Implementation Advisory Committee.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I just wanted to give a 2-minute update. There's, I have been named the co-chair along with Jane Rudolph of the Public Spaces Master Plan Implementation. What does the A stand for?
Advisory Committee. Mhm.
Advisory Committee.
Or think of this.
PSMP IAC. One more, the acronym for the vocabulary bank. And I had a meeting with them on with Jane and Irina, who is the staff person who is helping us get through that process. The Public Spaces Master Plan was approved 5 years ago. Under its terms, it's supposed to be updated every 5 years. So this is the update. I also want to officially ask everybody to agree that Gary Shinners has agreed to be the representative from the PRC on the advisory committee. Is that okay with everybody? And we appreciate it, Gary, that you're willing to do that. The advisory committee is pretty small, but it's mostly made up of other advisory committee or rather commission, other commissions like pedestrian commission, and things like that. So that's going to get started. We're going to have our first meeting sometime in May. We don't know when it is, but I'll keep you posted as we go through. Thank you, Marco. If there's no questions, then we'll go to the Gulf Branch letter, and then we will take up the Chesapeake Bay letter. Okay. Alex and Gary, can I turn this over to you? I know I didn't ask you to coordinate in advance, but
Yeah, I'll turn it over to Alex. He's the one that drafted the beautiful letter that I hope you guys will approve.
Sure. So this is in response to the Gulf Branch Stream Resiliency Project. This has been in the planning stages for some time now, and this is due to the fact that there's been significant erosion around county infrastructure in Gulf Branch. So the sanitary sewer lines have been exposed now for several years. The exposure gets worse and worse all the time due to the continuing runoff, and they're at risk of having a tree fall on them, say, and then having a significant sanitary sewer spill, which then would require emergency measures to deal with. And emergency measures are a lot more damaging than going through a planned process to protect these to begin with. The county is also trying to deal with runoff as best they can in the watershed, including just below the stream site. And they're also trying to minimize impact on the trees. So this is also right next to the Gulf Branch Nature Center. And it's a pretty heavily used park, lots of trails, a bunch beloved in the community. And so the county is now at 100% design, and they are planning on going ahead with the beginning stages of this construction this winter. And so in the interim, there have been some efforts by advocates in Arlington and outside of Arlington who have been pressing the county to reevaluate this project because they have great skepticism of stream restoration projects. And so there was a meeting that Gary and I and several staff people were at, about a month ago, Gary?
Yeah, that
Sound
sounds
about right? Where we
Yeah.
walked the whole site, and there are a lot of ideas about how to address runoff before it gets into the stream. My position, and I think our position should be that the project as it is currently designed is ready for construction, and that we should be going forward with it, and that the county should continue to seek opportunities to minimize runoff both within and before it gets into the park, and that a key aspect of that is dealing with the private property owners for whom most of the runoff is coming from. We all have impervious surfaces that we live on and use, and that is actually the cause of the problem. And so I've advocated for the county to push forward with this. We've been told in no uncertain terms by staff that they're 100% design. They do not expect to be making any changes to the design, and they are getting ready to push forward later this year.
But you support the project as
I do.
Yeah, I mean,
I think they've
it's
gone
not
through.
necessarily a stream. I mean, the top priority of the project is not stream restoration. It's protecting the water mains and the sewer mains.
And the county's been clear about that from the beginning. There have been people who have struggled with that, and the county has tried to use best management practices and to minimize the impact to the park and to the stream. But it is first and foremost a project to protect the infrastructure that runs through the park and keep it from being further damaged.
And we've had input from this commission over the course of many years, including going all the way back to Cole Gregory when he was on the commission. So So there've been lots of good suggestions that were made that, and a lot of them were adopted, I believe. So, all right, well, with that, is there any more discussion? Dave?
Yeah. Alex, just a couple questions. There's a reference to woody debris. So I just minimized it here. Let me, yeah.
Sure.
These include the inclusion of green streets below Military Road, the substitution of woody debris for gray infrastructure in Reach 2. What does that refer to?
So the county, after getting feedback from
Did I send out the wrong letter?
the residents, no, that's the right letter. He's got it.
Oh, okay.
And so that is a response by the county from residents who had advocated for less kind of hard gray infrastructure, less concrete, less cement. And so what they looked at doing, and this is becoming a best management practice throughout the country in these sorts of projects, is to, in one of the reaches where there's been some worsening erosion, they're putting in logs and stumps and whatnot, and using that to slow the water down rather than putting in gray infrastructure, so basically concrete, that will crack and fall apart and become part of the cultural resources of Gulf Branch given enough years. Just like everything else that's concrete in these stream valleys ends up being. And this is something that is increasingly used in stream restoration and stream resiliency projects. And it's something that they listen to and integrated into the project.
Great, thank you. And I guess the primary message of this is the sentence that says the PRC urges the county to redouble efforts to capture stormwater before it reaches the upper tributaries of Gulf Branch Stream. And that really involves future projects with both the private property owners and potentially public property like Madison Center parking lot, right?
Yes.
Which is a big contributor as well. But so the question is, in terms of the letter, is it clear enough that that's what you want to have happen? Like, is there a way to emphasize that a little bit more? Like, bold
Well,
it or
I think, well,
That-
can I take a chance and, can I take a stab at that, Alex? And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
you.
Sure, go ahead.
The point of this, so there are two things that are getting too intertwined. And so the point of this letter is to make sure the county understands that we are in favor of this project going forward with the adjustments that have been made. We are also in favor on a separate track and in separate efforts of all types, both policy and practical, to reduce stormwater runoff to the maximum extent possible. And then I also want to emphasize that we do have in the county budget a $2 million proposal to redo the Madison Center, including the roof and things. And it was asked, but answered, well, if the Madison Center is being renovated, why can't we just get rid of the parking lot? It's making a big contribution to the stormwater runoff. The answer is, believe it or not, it's not that big of a runoff. It doesn't create that much runoff compared to the runoff that comes from the private properties around there. So Alex, can you fill in any
No,
more?
I think that's exactly right. I think that this is about the existing stream resiliency project. There has been an effort by a few very persistent citizens to add additional, I'd say, small scale projects within Gulf Branch. And they have advocated that these would have a significant impact on it, and they've been able to connect with county staff from different departments on this. And while we don't oppose those per se, As Jill said, we believe that the project should go forward as is currently designed, and that we don't need to be spending more money to go back to the drawing board to redesign it with new projects that honestly won't have that significant of an impact on it. But that the county should be open to and continue to focus on looking for ways to reduce runoff before it gets into the stream, and preferably before it gets into the park. It is my belief that once the runoff gets into the park, into the volume that it does, that we've pretty much already lost. That at that point, we're just trying to adapt, and we're trying to minimize the impact, but there is going to be a substantial impact. So the battle is really to be fought where the water is coming from, and not once it already gets into public space and once it's already built up significant volume and velocity. And that's what that refers to. I think you're getting to the fact that there is a backstory to this, and there are other letters being circulated, and there are other committees that have drafted letters on this. And so this is not a single data point. And I mean, we could include a sentence in there alluding to that, about how this is a continuing debate amongst some. And I know Jill and I and Gary had kind of discussed that independently of each other. And we had decided that we should underline Jill's point. That is that instead of putting attention on what are really kind of side projects, that we should be focused on advocating for the project to go forward as it's currently designed.
Thank you. I hadn't been in that park in years, and I was fortunate to go on that walk around with you, and it was astounding. I was amazed at the damage from the creek. So I appreciate the efforts. Thank you.
And if I could just mention that in talking with Jill and Alex, we will have follow-up discussions.
We talked separately.
Yes, that's right. Not together. Yes.
No,
clarify. About having follow-up discussions about this separate track with DPR and perhaps DES on efforts to, full panoply of efforts that could be followed to mitigate stormwater inflow into the various reaches of Gulf Branch. But, Alex, I want to emphasize one of the points he made, which I think is a really good one, and that is so much of the stormwater inflow is coming off private property as opposed to parkland. And it would be great if we can find a way to further encourage private property owners to take steps to mitigate that stormwater runoff from their property. So.
And I just want to also extend this out to Daniel's project, the Master Transportation Plan. This was one of the reasons, one of the awarenesses that that came to my attention anyway, and why I think it was so important for us to make that comment that green streets, reducing streets and creating or even closing streets like Paris did for the benefit of putting trees there is going to be another potential way of reducing the runoff into the stream. So it has to be a multi-track approach. I mean, stormwater is coming from every impervious surface, and we have a lot of them. So we just have to use all the means that we have available. Okay, so thanks for those good questions and that good discussion. Anybody else have anything they want to add? Oh, Erica.
Yeah, I just have a question about when we're talking about most of the runoff coming from private property, is it mainly just because the surface area of roofs and driveways, or what's
That's exactly it.
Okay.
That is exactly it. It's roofs, it's driveways, it's patios, it's whatever is impervious on people's property, and this is a pretty densely occupied county, and this is a pretty dense watershed with a lot of single family homes.
yeah, like I'm just wondering of like what what would it look like making the proper changes like in the future to mitigate that?
That's an excellent question. There have been a lot of different efforts around the country to try to tackle this. I think Arlington once had a initiative to help, I think, commercial institutions and multifamily homes with stormwater. Stormwise, maybe. Does anybody remember that?
Yeah, that Eco Action Arlington used to run that. Yeah, stormwater
Mm-hmm.
wise.
And so DC has a pretty successful effort, and it generally involves education as well as providing technical expertise to homeowners and property owners on how to capture stormwater on their properties and let it infiltrate into the ground. Some programs also provide financial incentives. I know DC even provides a limited amount of financial support for it. But those are the programs that I'm most aware of. I'm sure there are others out there that I'm not. But this is a pretty big problem throughout the country, particularly in areas that have had combined stormwater and sewer systems, of which DC still has, though it's quickly becoming separated. I know Philadelphia has had this problem, Richmond, Alexandria has this problem. And so a lot of older cities were built this way, and it is difficult to untangle them. And it is often cheaper to reduce the amount of stormwater going into the system than to untangle the complex engineering below ground to separate them.
Got you. Thank you. Like, it just seems like it's kind of a mix of like maybe like a zoning thing, and also I know some places have implemented like stormwater taxes. I don't know if that's something that the county has considered. But yeah, just thinking of, what the solutions are.
We actually have a
Yeah, in
stormwater
fact,
fee now. The
yeah, in
county does,
fact, yeah, in the past 2 years, I think we've had it for a full year now, but I think two or 3 years ago, the county moved from a stormwater utility, I'm sorry, from a stormwater tax to a stormwater utility. So now we have a utility that charges a fee, and you can supposedly get a discount from your fee, and the fee is based on impervious surfaces on your property, and you can supposedly get a discount from your fee by doing certain things. Especially this impacted faith-based institutions with large parking lots. So one of the things that you can do is go into a park with a group of your own volunteers and help remove invasive plants or do land conservation. So I think the county is going to have to get a lot more aggressive on that, but that's their first foray in that direction. And it's still, I think in January was their second rendering of the bills. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes together and whether it actually has an impact. And then they also, within that same time frame, put in place a lot more strict development rules. You heard the development rules tonight that were amendments, but for projects that are not on RPAs or even if they are brand new ones, the stormwater runoff requirements are significantly more robust than they have been prior to the last 5 years or so. Like my neighbor next door had to put in a vault for stormwater runoff. So these are all great things. Maybe we should have a meeting just on stormwater. Seems like we do one every year, but it's such a big issue. So okay, so is there any more? Thank you for that good question. Okay, so I think we're ready to approve the letter. I'd like to, how do we have to have a motion? Gary, will you move to approve the letter?
Yes, I so move.
Anybody second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, raise your hand. Anybody opposed? Okay, the motion passes. There was a typo and I'll fix it and I'll send it around. Mid and Mid-Atlantic needs to be capitalized. Okay, so Claire's gonna do the letter. I'm gonna do the Gulf Branch letter. And then, so now we have time to talk about whether we want to do a letter on the Chesapeake Bay ordinance. And Alex, Andrew, two A's right next to each other on my screen. Andrew, what would you like to say in a letter if we decide to write one?
Again, I'm curious as to what the rest of the board's opinion are on this. But I mean, I think I've stated mine that I think the new rules aren't really, I don't think they actually provide a conservation benefit because they make it more difficult to perform any form of conservation activities. If a well-meaning individual wants to do some form of removal of invasive species, this potentially could be more barriers. And I don't think it's as necessary. A lot of it feels like people making changes to say that they made some changes that feel good. I don't really know if this has an actual benefit.
Yeah, I don't think
Again,
anybody
I wouldn't say that in the letter, geez, but
I don't think anybody would want to prevent someone from doing invasive plant removal.
well, I mean, but do the rules create more of a barrier? And it kind of appears that they do. Regardless of the intentions, we need to look at the actual outcomes.
Yeah, she didn't actually give us the new language, did she?
Well, it's kind of a before and after is what they showed, a list of what their rule changes were, but it wasn't the exact language.
It might be helpful to have that language before we decide what kind of response we should have. Because it gives us an opportunity to, see it in writing exactly what this proposed ordinance change looks like and what the likely impact would have.
What is the
Yeah.
timing of the ordinance?
It's gonna go before the board for a vote in June, so we have until our May meeting to draft a letter and send it to the county. How about if I suggest, Andrew, Marco, could you ask Aileen for the actual red line of the current ordinance and get that to Andrew? And then Andrew, maybe you could send around an email to everybody with a small, or, with whatever you think the letter might, what you think the problems are with it. I mean, other than what you're raising, I thought it was pretty, it's just kind of like checking the boxes. I agree with you on that. So I didn't really see much comment on, other than if it was going to make things worse. Did anybody else?
I don't have an opinion on, at this point, about the language. I do question whether a letter is required. It sounds as though this is a standard required update of the county's language based on a state update. And so I'm not sure, how much room the county actually has here, and how valuable a letter would be for something that sounds like a pretty standard update, and whether it's justified or whether it's going to make things more complicated or not, I'm not sure yet. But I do question whether a letter is even really needed here, unless we have a very strong feeling about it, one way or the other, that we feel the need to express.
Okay, anybody else? Well, you wouldn't object to Andrew getting a look at the language and seeing.
Oh, sure, no.
Yeah, because I mean, if it does have that effect, I think we should, I feel like I would want to say something. I'm just not sure it does have that effect. I mean, in particular, I think with the disease, we have a lot of problems with disease right now in native plants. Dogwoods have disease, and but I mean, the fact that the urban forester was upset about that and couldn't do anything about it kind of tells us that we're not going to be able to do anything about it. So,
I'll make another comment here on this. I've actually been on that committee, Seabort committee. I was on it for a couple of years when I was with
okay.
E2C2, and so we
Okay.
heard infrequently we received applications that, and as Eileen and Kristen indicated, that most of the stuff is dealt with administratively and never makes it to that committee. But we would hear these applications, I don't know, a couple of times a year maybe. And I would think that the potential concern is that because so many trees can be declared diseased in some way or another, that there is a concern that you are giving people who perhaps do not have the Chesapeake Bay's best interest in heart an avenue in which to remove all or most of the trees on the property and do it as cheaply as possible. And so that is the concern.
Okay. Got it.
And there are plenty of people who we heard from who were very well-meaning, who went above and beyond and really tried to do a great job with their application and minimize the impact on their lands and the adjacent tributaries. And there were others who did not. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
And so, unfortunately, sometimes one has to write these regulations for the people who perhaps do not want to cooperate or who are looking for ways not to.
Got it. Well, Andrew, would that satisfy you if you got a, yeah, okay. So, and Marco, are you able to contact Aileen and get that to Andrew?
I will go
Okay.
ahead and do that. Mhm.
Okay, great. And then like a couple weeks before our next meeting, Andrew, if you could report back, whatever you recommend, and then we can take a look at it from there. Okay. Wow. I thought we were going to have a short meeting, but it turned out to have a great discussion on stormwater and tree stewards and lots of other great stuff. Is there anything else anybody wants to, I want to raise one more thing. Next meeting, is going to be the May meeting. Don't forget, block off your afternoon to celebrate the tree stewards the same day as our meeting. So two things. I want to ask you to think about anything you think we should request presentations on for our future meetings. Some of the things that are in progress are the playground safety issue that Andrew raised not long ago. Another thing is the organizational chart, as well as the cost recovery, the fee cost recovery model, that we're looking at doing that sometime in the fall. We're also looking at possibly having a joint presentation with DPR and DES on natural resiliency in the parks. So if there's any other issues that you feel you'd like to have presentations on, please write to Gary or me, or you can blurt them out right now.
I don't necessarily want a presentation on this, but I do think we should nudge DPR about what the progress is on their trails study and what and their next steps.
That is one of them.
Trail study is on the list.
Okay.
And I was going to say that about this time of the year, we start thinking about where we want to have our summer field trip. And we were discussing today whether we should have the field trip be a education event on the trail system, on the trail study, the trail resilient, what is it called? The trail update. Anyway, Alex, you know what it's called. What is it?
Update, I think it is, or study. I think it's a study.
I thought they were starting the work already. Didn't they start the work? If they haven't started the work, there would be no purpose in doing a field trip.
Well, my understanding,
they proposed.
Yeah, please correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was that they had gotten the draft from their consultant, and that the last we had talked to them about it is that it was basically under review, that they were figuring out what their next steps might be,
okay.
whether they're going to be, hiring people. I mean, what are they going to do with this information? How are they going to prioritize it? How are they going to act on it?
So Alex, just to follow up, so the Arlington's Natural Service Trail Study, you're right, there was a first engagement that provided that overview, and there was engagement data that followed that. That was in January or February of 2024 when that process happened, and I believe a second engagement will be occurring this spring. So there will be follow-up to that coming up very shortly.
Adam, did you want to say something on this?
Well, no, on the field trip.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, no, sorry, not the field trip. I'm sorry, on the next meeting. So I proposed this last year. I didn't get much traction, but this year I might be more active and make an actual proposal for where. But in between the Bill Thomas Award thing and our meeting, I was wondering if maybe we could get together for like a happy hour kind of thing and just hang out and talk at a place nearby, and then go to our meeting. So
that would be great. I tried to organize it last year, but nobody else was interested.
yeah, so I'll propose a place, and
Okay.
and then and we can those who can come, those who can't.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you for that. So anyway, the trail study. Well, it might still be an interesting field trip. So, but if anybody has any other ideas for a field trip, but the trail study itself is on the drawing board for a future meeting. So rest assured that's on the drawing board. But if anybody has any place in Arlington parks that they'd like to look at, let me know, or Gary or Marco. Because we'll probably need to nail that down, probably at the next meeting or at the June meeting at the very latest.
Yeah, and I think, yes, if there's any general idea, maybe by May, we can even have it as a discussion topic, Jill. What I'll do is once we decide on one, I can then coordinate with the staff and anyone else who may be willing to provide either a presentation or a walking tour or some sort of background that they can provide on whatever it is that the commission decides to visit. Last year's field trip was really fun at the Nature Center, and and we try to have subject matter experts and folks who have worked on projects provide some context as well. So yeah, so if we can have that discussion sooner than later, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay, that's all I had. Does anybody else have anything that they'd like to say? All right. Well, with that, I'd like to have a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Anybody second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you so much for a great meeting. Oh, Daniel, did you just want to? Oh, okay. You're just voting. Okay. Okay. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming. And I just really appreciate everybody so much. Thank you. Have a great evening. And until we see each other again. Goodbye.
Thanks,
Thank you, everyone.